April 23rd, 2018, Radnor Township, Pennsylvania. Mark Geradot had spent months watching his wife fall apart as he cheated on their 24-year marriage. The 49-year-old had fallen in love with someone else, his boss, a vibrant 33-year-old woman with a promising career. But Mark's wife wasn't about to let him walk away, not without consequences. What happens when a broken heart turns into a weapon? When a scorned spouse refuses to let go? This is a story of love turned lethal. This is Jennair Gerardot, Love, Betrayal, Obsession. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potter. Welcome to Hitch to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Everybody.
Yes, welcome. And since it's Valentine's week,
yes,
be mine, be mine, be mine.
You got it, sweetheart. Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitch to Homicide, then like, rate, and review the podcast so other people who love true crime just like you can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. If you want true crime with us all the time, please go join our closed Facebook group. Just go to Facebook, type in H2H, In-Laws and Outlaws.
Yep.
Got to answer a couple questions and you're in. They're not even hard questions.
No,
go join.
Even I can answer them, so I'm attesting to the fact that they're not difficult.
I post extra information in there from the case each week. It's a good group of people. Lots of true crime folks in there. You can find us on Instagram at Hitch to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we now have a coffee link. Buy me a coffee link, not a coffee link. A buy me a coffee link. I need some coffee, y'all. I've had 2 hours of sleep as we get ready to record this. Bear with me. So if you want to send Rob some coffee,
cheers.
You can.
Cheers.
He drinks it all the time.
All the time.
You can find that link in our show notes. You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes where it says, send Chris and Rob a text. We love those. Keep them coming.
We sure do.
We're continuing our crimes of passion for the month of February. And as interesting as this case is, sweetheart, it's a cautionary tale.
As much as I said, be mine, this one sounds like it's, if you can't be mine, then no one can be.
That's right. That's right. I do want to give a trigger warning. This episode contains discussions of suicide. It's a case about infidelity and how a woman does not deal with it well at all. If you're triggered by an unfaithful partner or a spouse, this might not be the episode for you.
Yeah.
I also want to say that if you or somebody you love or know is struggling, whether you're facing mental health struggles, emotional distress, alcohol or drug concerns, or you just need somebody to talk to, all you have to do is pick up the phone and dial 988. That's the National Mental Health Hotline number. You can also chat by texting 988 or go to 988lifeline.org. There are counselors waiting to talk to you one-on-one. They're there 24/7, 365. If you're struggling or feeling hopeless or helpless, you're not alone. Pick up the phone and dial 988. It's free and confidential.
Good.
Well, before we get started, I got some sources to tell you about.
Go for it.
The Philadelphia Inquirer, DelawareOnline.com, The Washington Post, The Telegraph, The Philadelphia Daily News, The Wilmington News Journal, People Magazine, The Dr. Oz Show, Good Morning America, the BBC, NPR News, Reddit, Find a Grave, The Bad Bad Thing podcast, and Irreparable, 3 Lives, 2 Deaths, One Story That Has to Be Told. It is by one of the characters in our story today, Mark Geradot. I did read it, and I will post a note to the link and all the links to all the other sources that I used in the show notes.
All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Mark Christopher Geradot is born in New Haven, Indiana on October 1968 to Leonard and Alida Geradot. He's born into a large family. He's 10 of 11. 10 of 11.
Man.
It's a strict religious household, and Mark was a straight-A student who, from the time he entered kindergarten until he graduated high school, he never missed a day of school.
Really?
Ever.
Wow.
He's a little bit of a nerd. He's kind of socially awkward when he's younger, especially around girls. He had a very strict curfew. So did I back then. And he's not the guy who's the life of the party at school, at school or socializing or at the school dance. He might not even have been at the school dance.
Right.
But Jennair Michelle Cox lives across town. Jennair was born on December 19th, 1970 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Her mom and dad are Earl and Becky. And just the opposite of Mark, she only had one sister, Jill. Now, Jennair comes from a blue-collar family, and she kind of feels like she doesn't really fit in at her high school. She goes to a private Catholic high school where she and her sister both graduated. She marched kind of to the beat of her own drummer. And while the wealthy kids she went to school with were like taking cello lessons and going skiing over Christmas, she was at the Kiss concert and listening to heavy metal.
There you go.
I want to rock and roll all night and party every day.
That's great.
She doesn't really get along with her parents all that well. Her father is a verbally abusive alcoholic, and she and her father would have epic shouting matches. Like, she learned early on not to ever back down with her dad, but to win at all costs.
Oh, wow.
And she didn't like her mom very much either because her mom always had an opinion on who Jennair was dating. She's a decent student. She was a cheerleader and a singer. She liked doing the school plays and musicals. She always had a job, part-time.
Okay.
And Jennair's a free spirit. She liked to mess around with the boys she dated. She's a little more experienced. What's the line from Chicago? I started fooling around, and then I started screwing around, which is fooling around without dinner.
I hadn't heard that one.
Mark Geradot meets Jennair Michelle Cox in the summer of 1986. I remember it well. This was right in my heyday. She's working at a Taco Bell, and he's come into the restaurant with his buddies. She didn't go to the same school. Jennair went to the city school in Fort Wayne. Mark went to the county school. She was spunky. She had kinky blonde hair. Lots of people did. Mm-hmm. Lots of rock and rollers had long, kinky blonde hair. White Snake, I'm thinking off the top of my head.
There was some tall hair back in those days.
Big hair, don't care. Just saying, Aquanet was the thing.
The guys had the business in the front and party in the back.
Yep, and I'm getting ready to tell you about Mark's.
Okay, here we go.
But these two would cross paths on and off for the next couple of years. Mark was 2 years older than Jennair, and he's 18 when their eyes first locked across the crowded Taco Bell, because nothing says romance like fluorescent lighting and the scent of a lukewarm chalupa, while a kid with bad acne and a hairnet yells, "Number 47."
There you go. Perfect.
Jennair is 16. They would see each other around town at ball games, and they were both in show choir, but he never approached her to ask her out. Even though he saw her that night at the Taco Bell, he didn't ask her out. And he thought she was hot stuff. He thought she was hot. Now, again, she didn't get along with her mom and dad. And by the time Jennair is a senior, she's moved out of her parents' house and she's living with her grandparents.
Really?
She couldn't be at home anymore. Too much conflict.
Wow.
Then in 1990, Mark is in the Sears automotive section and he runs into Jennair. Mark is there to replace the battery on his 1980 Pontiac Firebird.
Nice.
He also has a mullet.
Of course he does.
Business in the front, party in the back.
We all did.
Everybody did. She asks him if he's a Geradot, and why wouldn't she? There are 11 of them. Mm-hmm. He knew exactly who she was, and she said to him, "Are you ever going to ask me out?" And he wanted to, but Mark had a girlfriend at the time. And according to him, it wasn't a serious relationship. So he broke it off. And within a week, he asked Jennair out on their very first date. He's at the University of St. Francis as an art and design student. He's a senior. Jennair is a sophomore at IU Fort Wayne, majoring in broadcast media.
Okay.
These two go out, and Mark introduces her to his friends, whom she really didn't get along with.
Okay.
She's outspoken. She has no filter. And that's just not the way Mark's friends were. They were more like him. They were a little more conservative. Now, these two begin to date, and Mark, even though he's a senior in college, he's only had sex one time in his life. Not judging. He's got all these guilt feelings around having sex that his mom put on him as a good Catholic boy.
Right.
And she's way more sexual than he is, and I'm not judging him or slut-shaming her, so don't email me, okay?
Yeah.
Those are just the facts.
Right.
So when Mark and Jennair do finally have sex, Jennair showed Mark the ropes, telling him that sex was supposed to be fun, and Mark was suddenly having the most fun he'd ever had in his life all the time.
That Pandora's box was opened.
It was. Now, after these two hop in the sack, Mark is thinking, wait a minute, this is what dating is? I think maybe I want to explore this.
Right.
With other girls. So he broke up with Jennair. He broke her heart, and after spring break, Mark started dating another girl, and he fell in love with her. Her name was Jamie. And karma has a funny way of showing back up again because Jamie broke Mark's heart, just as he had done to Jennair. He licked his wounds. He felt sorry for himself. He was also on the lookout for Jennair. He ran into her at the mall. It's the 80s. That's where everybody was hanging out. And Jennair was working there. And the moment he saw her, he knew he wanted her back. And in a very 16 Candles move, he waited outside where she worked at Sears, sitting on the bumper of his car.
He wasn't holding a boombox above his head?
No, that's a different movie.
Okay.
That didn't happen. No.
Yep.
She called him a jerk. Rightfully so. He kissed her, and later that night, he promised her that he would never again break her heart. That is a lie.
Okay.
This time around, they're older, they're more serious, but there's one problem. Mark's family doesn't like Jennair. In fact, his mother called Jennair a hussy. It's after this remark that Mark moves out of his parents' home. And these two date seriously for a year, and when Mark's roommate took a job in Indianapolis, Jennair moved in with him. And they both had part-time jobs, and she was taking classes at IU. Now, in 1991, Mark graduated college and had a hard time finding a job, but he finally did as a graphic designer with a magazine publisher in Indianapolis.
Okay.
So now they're going to have a long-distance relationship. Him in Indy and her in Fort Wayne, which is 2 hours away.
Right.
They saw each other on the weekends, but it wasn't enough for Jennair. And at the age of 22, Mark bought Jennair a promise ring that was a pearl. He was afraid to pick out an engagement ring by himself because Jennair had this thing that she would do over gifts. She had this way about herself. She was open and opinionated, and if he bought her something that she didn't like, she wouldn't fake it. She would chastise him about it.
Man.
And he didn't want the engagement ring to be a huge fail. And this way, she could pick it out herself. So he gives her a promise ring, and they're going to pick out the engagement ring together.
Dude, run away. Run away.
Just wait. The next weekend, as Jennair tells him that she, quote, can't do it anymore, end quote, Mark pulls this promise ring out of his pocket, and she's saying, I need more. I think we need to break up. And he shows her the promise ring and simply says, will you marry me? And she said yes. And the next day they told their parents and friends, and not everybody is excited about this marriage.
I'm sure.
You see, while Mark is traveling back and forth all the time, he's spending all his free time with Jennair, and his friends, especially his best friend Mike, never gets to see him. Not to mention, Jennair doesn't get along with his best buddy's girlfriends either. None of them really liked her. They thought she was too brash and too controlling. They didn't think she was the right person for Mark. But opposites attract, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. His buddies tell him that she dictated his life, where he could go, who he could see, what he should wear. She would get upset with him if he turned the lights on in the morning to get ready to go to work. So he dressed in the dark.
Wow.
She's controlling him, but it doesn't bother him because he grew up with a controlling mother.
Yeah.
On October 23rd, 1993, while Mark's family and friends are telling him not to marry Jennair, these two tie the knot and go on a honeymoon cruise where Mark gets seasick. And he wants to go back to the room, and Jennair tells him, sure, go on, but it's my honeymoon and I'm going out. And she did.
Jeez.
And he tells her to enjoy herself, and he went to bed. To which you have to say,
Yeah.
Things that make you go,
Yeah. Not a great start.
When they came home from their honeymoon, Jennair takes a job as a waitress, and she transferred to Butler University, and Mark is working at his first job with the Bemis Group. They lived mostly on love in a tiny apartment, eating ramen noodles and sleeping in a twin bed that also served as their couch.
Wow.
Which I loved because you know what? Some of the best times you have when you're younger and married is when you have nothing.
Yeah, true.
And you're just making it happen.
And by the way, I still love ramen noodles.
Yes, you do. But their newly wedded bliss wasn't without its problems. They argued about money and about Mark spending time with his friends. Jennair didn't really have friends, and she wanted Mark to spend all his free time with her. And he liked hanging out with the bros.
Mm-hmm.
So they fought about this a lot.
Okay.
In 1998, these two buy their first house after saving and scrimping for 5 years. It was a little starter home, and it needed work, which was why they could afford it. But for the next 7 years, they remodeled the entire home, just the two of them. So they're Chip and Joanna Gaines.
Exactly.
I wonder if they put shiplap in the house. No, that's way before shiplap. But you know what? If you know, you know.
Yeah.
They were working hard and vacationing together. They were having lots of fun. They talked about maybe having children, even picking out some baby names. But the time never seemed right, and Mark really didn't have the baby bug. So they got themselves a little golden retriever puppy and named her Mesa. And she was their firstborn child.
We have a third-born child.
Scotty is our favorite child most of the time.
Yeah.
And for the next 14 years, these two poured their parental instincts into their fur baby. Now, they're both making money. Jennair's working as a marketing coordinator for a real estate firm. She's traveling all over the country on this corporate jet and coordinating the setup of trade shows. And sometimes Mark would even go with her. And she liked this job, although Jennair didn't really get along with her boss. But she's doing so well that in 2001, Mark quit his job at the advertising agency he was working for and started his own design firm. And his new design agency takes off. He was running the business out of the house, but Geradot and Company finally acquired enough clients and monthly income to get themselves an office, a few employees, and even an intern.
Nice.
Reminded me of Calvert Communications when I first started my ad agency.
There you go.
And while work was going well for Mark, it wasn't going well for Jennair, and she lost her job. So Mark offers Jennair a job at the design firm. I mean, what could go wrong? They're already together every hour of the day and night outside of work. Why not just make it 24/7, right?
Right.
Yeah. Rob and I work in the same house, but we text each other and FaceTime all day long because we're far apart from each other.
Yeah,
we don't see each other all day.
Yeah, my studio is way down here, underground.
I'm way up top.
Yeah, and you're on the second floor, which is actually the third floor from where I am. Figure that one out.
Yeah. Rob gets up to my office and he'll sit down on my couch and be like,
It's a long trek.
I'm like, did you take those stairs a little too fast?
I've considered putting an elevator in. Just kidding.
But Jennair is not creative like the other employees, but she is an organizer. She could stay on top of clients and deadlines like nobody's business. She wasn't creative, but she was detail-oriented down to the nth degree.
Yes, we have a friend exactly like that who we call her Spreadsheet. I won't mention her name.
That's called foreshadowing. And I love my spreadsheet friend.
I know, we both do.
Very much.
Yep.
I can't work Excel. Don't judge me. Don't email me.
Yeah, exactly.
But she's not creative, but she delivered her opinions on the creative's work in the company with zero tact. And if you've ever worked around creative people, that's not really the way to do it.
Yeah.
She was bossy and brash, and the other employees did not like her. And within 6 months, the crew got together with Mark and said, look it, either she goes or we go.
Yeah.
And he chooses his wife.
Yeah.
One person quit, one person was fired, and Mark pared down his employees to a smaller team who, according to Mark, could tolerate Jennair. Then in 2004, Mike, Mark's best friend from childhood, calls him and says, hey, I have to go to Germany for business. Why don't you get away from all the stress of running your own business and come with me? And remember, Mike and Jennair don't like each other at all.
Right.
I think it would be hard to have your best friend and your wife at odds with each other all the time.
Yeah.
But while these two are in Berlin, Mark has a few too many drinks one night and drops his inhibitions. He hooks up with an Austrian woman in an apartment in East Berlin. He has sex with this woman and cheats on Jennair.
Wow.
I've never cheated on anyone, not even a teen romance.
Yep.
But it seems to me that it would take more than a few drinks to cheat, right? Like something's not right at home if you can drop your inhibitions and cheat on your spouse with somebody you met that night. At least that's what I would think.
Yeah. I was born with guilt, so I could never do it because I couldn't live with myself.
Well, the next morning after his walk of shame, he meets up with his best buddy, Mike, who basically says, I saw that coming from a mile away last night. And that he had never seen Mark look happier than he did with the Austrian woman.
Wow.
Yeah. And he wasn't going to stop him. He wasn't going to put a stop to it.
Right.
Mark comes home feeling guilty, and not long after, he sends an email to Mike about that night. It's unclear to me if Mark knew that Jennair could get into his email account, or if he knew she read his emails. But Jennair sees this exchange between her husband and his best friend, and she knows Mark has cheated, but she doesn't confront him with the information, which makes me think the email was vague enough for Jennair to want to know more.
Right.
So she uses her husband's computer, she uses Mark's email and computer, and writes to Mike, the best friend, baiting him to talk about what happened in Berlin. And now Jennair knows for certain that he cheated on her. And she also knows that Mike was very happy about it.
Right.
And she would never, ever forgive Mark's best friend, Mike, after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. She confronts Mark, and he admits to the affair, and they decide to go on a marriage retreat, a marriage boot camp, which was a days-long program where they're in the company of other couples who've also experienced infidelity, along with professionals who create a safe space to talk about the affair and figure out a plan for healing and a way forward.
Okay.
And Jennair ultimately forgives Mark. She loves him, and she believed him when he said he'd never hurt her again. Again.
It's like Tropic Thunder.
Yeah. Here we go again. Again. When 2005 rolls around, the real estate market was booming, and they sold their little starter home that they'd remodeled and bought themselves a McMansion in Carmel, Indiana.
Oh, wow.
6,000 square feet for the two of them and the dog. The house was 10 years old when they bought it, and they ended up putting another $100,000 into it. And by the time they finished remodeling, the housing bubble burst. By 2009, their design firm is really taking a hit. And since they own their own business, it's on them to pay their employees.
Yeah.
And the stress was all on them. And these two start to take their worries and stress out on each other. Times like this will bring couples together, or it will tear them apart. That's what therapists will always tell you. Hard times, you pull together or you fall apart.
Right.
And Jennair is a critic, remember, right? She says whatever is on her mind, and she tells Mark that he's not a good manager of people and that he was disorganized, and more than anything, that he had ADD, attention deficit disorder. She called him ADD boy.
Wow. Could she be any more condescending?
Yeah. And Mark's mom, by this point, had just passed away from Alzheimer's. And he's thinking, what if I really am losing my mind here? I mean, what if I'm going to be like my mom? Mm-hmm. And after a visit to a therapist, he starts taking Adderall. And it does help him to focus, but it also gives him the confidence to come for Jennair when she's being argumentative. Because before, he's always just, gone along with whatever.
Very passive.
To keep Jennair happy.
Yeah.
And now he's giving as good as he's getting.
Right.
According to Mark, Jennair knew how to fight because it's all she did with her dad growing up. She would brag about how she knew how to push her father's buttons. And when Mark and Jennair would fight, she would tell him, according to Mark, that he was just like her dad and, quote, "You can't have a argument without losing your shit and screaming like a howler monkey," end quote.
Wow. Man.
Ouch.
Yeah.
But according to Mark, part of what was happening was that he'd grown up. He wasn't the shy young boy who would take whatever Jennair would dish out. Now he was a man and he was losing his temper with her a lot. And Jennair liked to argue. And Mark would later say that resolution was never Jennair's goal in an argument. It was destroying the other person. And not only that, Jennair was now taking their arguments public. She liked to argue in front of their neighbors or just out at a restaurant.
Jeez.
And this went on for a few months until he decided to stop taking the Adderall. One night when they were having dinner at a restaurant, they got into an argument, and instead of waiting until they got home to hash it out, Jennair got angrier and more intense at the table inside the restaurant and threw an entire glass of red wine in Mark's face.
What?
She took the car. He walked home.
Gee whiz.
By 2011, the recession had hit their business hard, and they let their last employee go. They're still living in this 6,000 square foot home and paying this mortgage. Mark is now working out of the basement of their house, and Jennair is doing contract work in marketing for an insurance company. But then, through a mutual colleague, Mark was recommended for a position that was open with a small web development firm in Greenville, South Carolina. I did my internship in advertising in Greenville, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. I love that place. It's gorgeous.
Yep.
They were looking for a creative director, and after speaking with their CEO, Mark tells Jennair that he wants to pursue this position. Now, they both think this change in scenery and this new job is just what they need. They closed the business. They put the house on the market for $50,000 less than they paid for it because that's what their real estate agent told them, that it might take a year to sell it and that they would have to take a loss on it.
Right.
And now they're paying rent in Greenville and they're still making a mortgage payment while they wait to sell this house. Mark moves to Greenville and into a studio apartment in the basement of a couple's home. They found another real estate agent in Indianapolis who told them to put the house on the market for what they paid for it, and they did, and not long after, they got an offer on the house.
Oh, wow.
Now, in the middle of all of this, their beloved golden retriever, their first child, is in kidney failure, and they had to put her down. And Mark had just lost his mother, his father, and now his dog. And then just a few months later, Mark's older brother and idol, Ernie, dies of lung cancer. So he's just had loss after loss after loss.
Yeah.
They didn't have a home or a mortgage, but they also didn't have a dog. So they got involved in some rescues in Atlanta, and this is where they meet Huck, a 6-year-old golden retriever. And not long after, Huck gets a sister, a 9-year-old rescue named Abby, both golden retrievers. And these two dogs really were their focus, maybe instead of their marriage. Maybe the dogs were like the two things they could agree upon and love together kind of thing.
Right.
After being in the Carolinas for a few months, Jennair gets a job as a marketing manager in Greenville. And for the next 5 years, these two are paying down their debt. And according to Mark, from 2012 to 2016, they'd fallen back in love with each other. They took vacations to Colorado where they loved it. And they thought about maybe moving there someday. They were like, Colorado's the best. This is where we want to end up. Mm-hmm. Then in November of 2016, Jennair was laid off from her job, and Mark started looking for this new position in Boulder, Colorado. And he interviewed for a job, but he didn't get it. And these two, while in South Carolina for 6 years, they really had their eye on moving to Colorado. This was something they talked about a lot. And finally, Mark's boss is like, dude, I know you're trying to get out of here, so I'm giving you 90 days to find a new job and a new home.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I guess don't talk about your plans in the office, y'all.
Exactly.
Jennair's trying to get another job, but no one's hiring her. She ended up taking a job as a checkout clerk at a grocery store, and this just sort of added to her already low self-esteem. Mark is freelancing, and they're trying to make ends meet while he keeps his ears and eyes peeled for any position he's qualified for. And he sees an opportunity on LinkedIn for a creative director at the University of Delaware, a place he had never been before. Mark applies for the job and writes a cover letter, and then he calls the person he'd be reporting to let her know just how much he wants this job. Her name was Meredith Chapman, and she was the director of marketing.
Okay.
But Delaware wasn't the only place he was applying. But after speaking with Meredith Chapman on the phone, it was the job he wanted. A week after he interviews in person for the job with Meredith, he gets his official offer. Now he's been interviewing in Denver too, but Mark tells Jennair that Delaware is what he feels is right. Now, you may remember on August 21st of 2017, there was a solar eclipse that was extremely visible in the United States.
Yeah.
And Greenville, South Carolina was one of the places that experienced the total eclipse. And not long after that day, Mark moved from South Carolina without Jennair to work at the University of Delaware with his new boss, Meredith.
Okay.
And Jennair stayed behind to tie up loose ends. She quits her job at the grocery store and starts planning for their move and looking for homes. And the plan was for Jennair to join him in 45 days. 45 days.
It's a long time.
But Mark was really excited to work with his new boss. Meredith Lynn Sullivan Chapman was born on January 31st, 1985 in Newark, Delaware. Her parents were Faye and Andrew, and she had a sister and a brother. Growing up, she went to elementary and middle school in Newark, graduating from Avon Grove High School in 2003, where she was an exceptional student, a competitive dancer and gymnast, and was also captain of the cheerleading squad. She held many roles in her student council, and she loved performing in the school musicals as well. She lettered not only in cheer, but lacrosse and track, all while making top grades and joining the National Honor Society. After graduation, she committed to the University of Delaware, where she was a college cheerleader. She even traveled to China with the cheerleading squad as a goodwill ambassador.
Wow.
Now, while she's at school in Delaware, she was also an adjunct professor, and she coached the cheerleading team at her alma mater, Avon Grove High School.
Okay.
But when she was sidelined herself with an injury, she had to give up cheering at the University of Delaware and decided to focus on her passion for communications. So she's a world beater.
Yeah.
She was doing all of that and getting great grades, and she's a beautiful girl.
Okay.
She interned for a television station, WHYY, running social media, reporting and producing an Emmy-nominated documentary called Joe Biden's Journey. Okay. Then she worked on Capitol Hill as a communications manager for United States Congressman Mike Castle and ran a winning campaign for Delaware State Treasurer Chip Flowers.
Dang.
She's busy.
Yeah.
She hasn't even turned 30 yet.
Man.
She married Luke Chapman in 2009, who was a Newark city councilman. She left politics to work for her alma mater and worked her way up the ladder to become senior director of marketing. While there, she also created award-winning social media programs and taught courses in digital marketing and public relations. Meredith accomplished more in a day than most are capable of in a week.
Yeah, all of a sudden I feel like a complete failure.
There's more. She served on nonprofit boards, volunteered in her local community. She participated in countless races for charitable causes, and in 2016 ran for the Delaware Senate.
Jeez.
She didn't win, but it was a very tight race. She lost by like 750 votes.
Wow.
And I want to tell you, when she runs for the state Senate, she's only 31.
Man.
Yeah. She loves to run 5Ks and marathons. And when Mark takes the job at the University of Delaware, he is 49 years old.
Okay.
Meredith, his boss, is 32.
Okay.
17 years younger than he is. And Mark thinks Meredith is a superstar because she is.
Right.
When Mark arrives in Delaware, he moves into this basement apartment that the planner and organizer Jennair had found for him that was for rent. But when he leaves South Carolina, it's not all rainbows and hearts.
And unicorns.
And unicorns. She's taken him back after he cheated on her in Germany. They've gone to their marriage boot camp. They're going to make it work, but something wasn't right. And maybe she just wasn't over his infidelity, his one-night stand. Maybe she wasn't happy because she wasn't doing the kind of work or had the kind of career that she wanted. But when Mark arrives in Delaware, Jennair is pretty cool toward him over the phone, according to him. Okay?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he is settling in at his new office and getting to know his work colleagues. After one meeting at the end of the first of the week, Meredith asks him if he wants to go get a quick drink and debrief about everything he'd done that week or learned that week. And Mark says, yes.
Sure.
It's November, and they got to a bar. They sit down. 3 hours later, they're still sitting at the bar talking, and Mark is suddenly opening up to her about his personal life. He told her about losing both of his parents back to back and about his brother's death as well. He filled her in on the year he'd had with Jennair and how hard it had been. And Meredith told him how she was really close to her brother and sister. And by the end of the night, Mark, who's known Meredith for all of 4 days, is completely smitten. When they parted ways that Friday night, she asked him if he had plans for dinner the next night. Her husband, Luke, was on a hunting trip. She tells Mark that she loves her husband, but she hates hunting. And Mark has said that something about the way she said that he hated hunting told him that she wasn't happy in her marriage.
How'd he get that?
Well, take that for what you will.
Yeah, okay.
Later that night, on the phone, Mark tells Jennair about having drinks and appetizers with Meredith, to which Jennair replies, yeah, I saw that transaction on your credit card tonight. $60, Mark? Why did you pay if it was a work thing with your boss? End quote. After this, he doesn't tell Jennair that he's having dinner with Meredith the next night. In Mark's book, Irreparable, he says he was, quote, anxiously anticipating and worrying about the night as if it were a date with a new crush, end quote.
Oh, man.
He's 17 years older than she is.
Yeah.
And he's known her for a week. And if you're happy in your marriage, how and why would you do this in the first place? Or is it just me?
No, it's just wrong.
He goes further than this. While at dinner, Mark admits to Meredith that he has a, quote, professional crush on her, end quote.
He told her that?
Yes.
Dummy.
To which she replied, quote, 100%. That's how I feel, end quote. He begins to do small favors for Meredith outside of work, like picking up lunch for her. They had so much in common, they thought it would be fun to make up, get this, an Excel spreadsheet of all the things they had in common.
Oh, jeez.
When Thanksgiving rolled around, Mark was going back to South Carolina, but he says Jennair talked him out of it because Thanksgiving had never been a big holiday for them. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving is a casual dress day at the office at the University of Delaware. And according to him, Meredith wore jeans, a green sweater, and leather riding boots, and it was all Mark could do to keep it in his pants.
Wow.
He told himself, according to him, that there was a line and he wouldn't cross it. Well, guess what?
I'm going to guess he crossed that line.
Not only is he going to cross it, he's pole vaulting over it, setting it on fire and doing a victory dance on the other side.
Pole vaulting, no pun intended.
Yes, no pun intended. Or maybe it was. Later that night, after they admit to their professional crushes, he's texting her, and she asks where he is. And when she finds out he's eating dinner alone, she texts him back, #so invite me. For the next 7 hours, these two exchange text messages. He changes her name in his contacts to M. She spends Thanksgiving with her family, and he spends it alone, thinking of her and probably thumping dummy. I don't know. Mark had agreed to help one of his new colleagues move Thanksgiving weekend, and lo and behold, so had Meredith, and they decide they're going to have dinner together after this. Now, remember, she's married, too, and he's at this dinner that everybody goes to after helping with the move.
Yeah.
So are they making googly eyes already in front of their work colleagues?
Who knows?
Who knows? Meanwhile, each day, Mark is telling Jennair about his day. And what do you think the one word that he says more than anything in these conversations?
I have no idea.
Meredith. Meredith this, Meredith that, Meredith this. He feels like a newly invigorated man in Meredith's presence, and he didn't want to lose that feeling. And a week later, these two slip off to dinner, gazing at each other across the table. He takes her back to his apartment, pours her a Cabernet, their eyes meet, and they kiss. The next morning, these two are meeting up for a run, and 15 minutes into the run, he stops and tells Meredith that he can't do this to Jennair. According to Mark, Meredith was hurt and rejected. But this rejection isn't going to last very long because Meredith's 9-year marriage is about to be over. Meredith told Mark that her marriage had kind of been over for the past 3 years, that they lived in different parts of their house and kept up their image as happy couple because he's a sitting councilman and she was an aspiring politician.
Right.
So a crumbling marriage isn't good for the campaign trail, right?
Sure.
Now Mark's in a predicament. He's in love with his boss, who's in a loveless marriage, and his wife of almost 25 years is scheduled to be in Delaware on December 16th in 2 weeks. And she knows something's afoot.
Right.
She smells betrayal in the air like a bloodhound at a crime scene. She knows it.
Yep.
Mark is also sort of putting on a front for Jennair on another level. Remember, Jennair and Mark had always wanted to live in Colorado, and he actually gets a job interview there. So he flies there. He takes the day off from his job in Delaware to interview. And before the interview, he says that Jennair told him, quote, "Don't screw this up on purpose because you don't want it. This is where we want to be," end quote. He has the interview where the whole time he's thinking about Meredith.
Right.
And when he makes it to the airport to fly back to Delaware, he sends Meredith a text. Quote, "3 things I know. Number 1, you are my hero. Number 2, I would take a bullet for you. Number 3, no more lines." End quote. I told you, pole vaulting over that line.
Yep.
As soon as he lands in Delaware, he rushes over to the office at the University of Delaware campus where he plans to take a photo of himself behind her desk. What kind of photo? I don't know. Was he planning on sending a nude of himself to her from behind her desk?
Yeah.
He never says that in his book. But it's after hours. Everyone should be gone. He gets there and the staff have all stayed late to decorate their offices for Christmas. And when he walks into his office, there's a stocking hanging on the fireplace behind his desk with his name on it. And on his desk is a Charlie Brown Christmas tree with one ornament. And under the tree was a coffee mug with a handwritten inscription, #so invite me.
Oh, man.
Then Mark has to go back to South Carolina. His dog is dying, and it's the first time he's been home in 3 weeks. He and Jennair are going to give this puppy her best weekend before putting her down. But when he and Jennair have dinner, of course, his new job comes up, and so does Meredith. And when Mark is finished waxing poetic about his boss, Jennair says to him, quote, "Just don't fall in love with her," end quote.
She knows.
And he tells her, quote, "It's not like that," end quote. Liar, liar, pants on fire.
Exactly.
When he gets back to Delaware, Mark and Meredith go on a real date, dinner and a college basketball game between Notre Dame and the University of Delaware. And when the game is over and they're sitting in the car, Mark tells her, just after he lies to Jennair, saying it's not like that, he tells Meredith, quote, "I love you," end quote. She tells him she loves him too. It's been 4 weeks.
Man.
He and Jennair have been married 24 years, and he can't muster the gumption. He can't get his balls out of his purse long enough to tell his wife, Jennair, the truth.
Right.
First.
Right.
I get it. People grow apart, but get a divorce, or at the very least separate and agree to see other people before you start dating your boss who's 17 years your junior.
Exactly.
I'm off my soapbox.
There you go.
The week before Jennair arrives, Meredith and Mark spend as much time as they can together. They're like teenagers, according to him. They're making out like teenagers. My guess is it was a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
If he's already told her that he loves her, he's sleeping with her.
Yep.
On December 16th, Mark was supposed to fly back to South Carolina to meet Jennair and the movers, but there was a snowstorm and his flight was canceled. So he saw Meredith one more time at the hotel that he stayed at near the airport so he could catch his flight the next morning. When he lands in South Carolina and Jennair and Huck are waiting for him, Jennair's been coordinating with the movers and packing up their life. These two are driving from South Carolina to Delaware with their things. And while he's on the road and Jennair is too, in different cars, she's actually driving the moving truck. I mean, who wears the pants? She's driving the moving truck.
Yep.
Mark calls his best friend Mike and confesses that he's met someone and he's in love with his boss. And Mike is happy for him because, remember, Mike and Jennair do not get along.
Yeah, he doesn't like her.
He didn't want Mark to marry her in the first place.
Right.
So these two make it to Delaware, and Jennair and Mark set up a routine. A week later, Jennair turned 47. That night at dinner, she tells him that she feels like her career is over. She's ready to retire at 47, and she, according to Mark, says she's going to rely on his success from here on out. She wants him to be the breadwinner.
Right.
She wants to stay home.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they both agree on that.
Yeah. Christmas is just a few days later, and these two didn't decorate or exchange gifts, but Mark and Meredith had exchanged gifts. Mark's trying to act like everything is normal, but Jennair knew something was up. Mark didn't really talk to her anymore, and he wasn't interested in having sex with her anymore. Now, back in 2004, when Jennair discovered Mark had this one-night stand in Berlin, she was able to read his emails. So what do you think she does?
She goes back to his emails.
While Mark is sleeping, she takes the keys to his office and goes there and clones his email.
Wow.
Then she clones his phone, or she buys software in order to do this. Then she goes out and buys a dozen or more recording devices. These aren't just your run-of-the-mill recorders. They're very small and voice-activated, and they only record when someone is speaking. Jennair sews these little recording devices into Mark's suit jackets, and each night she's taking the one out that she put in there for that day, and she puts a fresh one in the next jacket that Mark has laid out the night before. He's sleeping through this.
Man.
She knows everything. Everything. She's hearing everything that goes on between Mark and Meredith.
Everything.
Yes. And as 2017 came to a close and 2018 arrived, Mark says he was tired of putting up a good face. Jennair asks him, "Are you having an affair?" And he says, "I don't know what you're talking about." To which she eventually says to him, and rightfully so, I might add, quote, "Just rip off the Band-Aid and tell me you f***ing end quote.
Oh, man. Wow.
She said to him, quote, "It's Meredith, isn't it?" End quote. And he denies it. And she begins to quiz him on things about Meredith that she couldn't possibly know. And Mark can't figure out how she knows some of the details that she does. And it's because she's been recording him.
Sure. Yeah.
She can hear Meredith say to Mark, "I have felt more joy and more excitement this fall than I ever did before. I want to see you again today. I really want to. I kind of need to."
Man, that's just, okay. Listen, I got to hand it to her. She's like sewing these recording devices into a suit, and she's got proof.
She does.
Wow.
Yeah. But when Meredith is like, where are you going to be? I want to see you today. He replies with, where are you going to be? And they end this conversation with, I love you too. His nickname for her is M, and Meredith's in love. No one had ever been so tender with her. She loved it that he called her M instead of Meredith. She's giddy with love. She's saving his voicemails. And as for Mark, he feels all the challenges with Jennair, and he feels all the promise with Meredith, like they're a couple of teenagers. Again, they don't know that they're being recorded.
Right.
At this point, Jennair knows. He's leaving her for a woman who is 15 years younger than she is, who is thin and vibrant. Jennair makes it her job to track Meredith and Mark's every move and gather evidence of the affair because he's saying nothing is going on. He's just gaslighting her.
Right.
And she likes to be in control. So this is how she's in control. He's lying. She knows it's not true. Mm-hmm. It seems as if she wants to save her marriage. She's just turned 47. She starts going to the gym. She gets new hair. She gets highlights. And then she sent Mark naked photos of herself because she wants to get a reaction of him.
Right.
But she knows that he cares for Meredith more than he cares for her. But she still wants proof so that whatever he's saying to her, she knows what's really going on. And next, Jennair gets 2 state-of-the-art GPS trackers, and she places one on his car and one on Meredith's car. She labels them Mark Liar Jerk and M Whore.
Oh, man.
And she follows them. She tracks them everywhere. So when he's lying to Jennair about where he is or what he's doing, she's watching it all play out and listening to it as well. And I get it. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. But that had to be torment to her soul.
Yeah.
And it's definitely damaging to her already frazzled mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure she's on the edge as it is.
She is.
Yeah.
Jennair opens her own checking account. She gets a secret credit card. She buys a lock-picking kit.
Jeez.
She gets DNA testing swabs for his clothes. Mark is saying one thing when she confronts him all the time and acting the complete opposite.
Right.
When Mark finally tells her that he wants out, he also tells her that he will go to marriage counseling. Why?
Yeah.
Because Mark's acting like he's trying to put it all back together while Jennair knows that he's not.
Right.
She knows he's still seeing Meredith romantically.
Mm-hmm.
He tells her, quote, I'm not going to give you hope, but I don't want to make a mistake, end quote. What?
Whatever.
She wants him to admit that he's in love with Meredith, but he won't make a decision. And he's saying it's a back and forth thing. Quote, I do love you, and I can still divorce you, end quote. And when she asks, are we over? He says, quote, no, I wouldn't go to therapy if we were over, end quote. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, the guy has no spine.
Jennair is seeing a divorce coach on her own, and yeah, she's angry. She's raging, actually. But what she's not telling her therapist is that she's basically turned into the CIA of Nookie. Wiretaps, GPS tracking. Yeah.
I was about ready to say she's in the wrong business.
Yeah, like maybe even a little reconnaissance mission in the dead of night.
Yeah.
You know, if Infidelity had a most wanted list, she'd already have Mark's mugshot pinned to the top with like red string connecting all the evidence.
Yeah, it's a good thing they didn't have drones back then.
Seriously. Yeah. But Jennair's keeping a record of everything that's happening in her relationship with Mark. It's a video diary, and I've heard some of it. It is heartbreaking. She confesses all her feelings, how she loves him. Jennair, she tells her divorce coach she can't accept it. She's not accepting it, that he's going to leave her. Sure. She really loved Mark, and he was leaving her, and she didn't want to toss everything that they had had for the past 24 years away. I mean, that's 24 years you've invested in somebody and a relationship.
Yeah.
And she feels like he's trading her in on a younger, prettier model.
Yeah.
And he is.
Right.
Jennair tells Mark that she's written to the president of the University of Delaware and ratted them out.
Ooh.
that they were having inappropriate workplace love affairs.
Jeez.
She also calls Meredith's husband, who isn't quite yet her ex-husband, but after this, he certainly is.
Mm-hmm.
After Jennair calls the university and Meredith's husband, Luke, who immediately presents Meredith with a document asking her to admit to adultery and agreeing to an expedited divorce.
Wow.
He moved out of their house, and he wanted Meredith out of that house by April. So what could have been an amicable divorce for Meredith turned into,
Mm-hmm.
you have to admit to adultery.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
At work, they separate Meredith and Mark. And the University of Delaware started an investigation into their affair, and Jennair wanted Mark to file a sexual harassment suit against his boss, Meredith.
Wow, she's brutal.
Yeah, but Mark refused. He said he wouldn't do it.
Right.
And he no longer reports to her. And they both start looking for other jobs. And Meredith pretty quickly gets a new job at Villanova. So Jennair writes a letter to Meredith's new bosses at Villanova, letting them know that she's had an affair with a married man, saying, quote, "You should pick a more honorable person for this role.
Man.
Please don't show Meredith this letter," end quote.
Jeez.
But nothing happened. Then she just starts stalking her online, repeatedly asking to friend request her on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram. And Meredith is not blocking Jennair, but she texts Mark and tells him, and Mark tells Jennair to stop harassing Meredith. But yet he's not asking Jennair for a divorce yet.
Right.
So why can't he leave Jennair or the affair? And Jennair is pushing him to make a decision about what he's going to do. Quote, "You will eventually treat Meredith like you treat me. She won't save you, but I've loved you heart and soul for 24 years. I am so broken and drowning that I cannot see the light or the point. I don't want a life or future with you if you cannot love me back. I don't want to be a backup plan or the cause of your misery," end quote. So why isn't he divorcing her?
Right.
When he's with Meredith, he's ready to get divorced. But then he'd be with Jennair, and he would be reminded of their 24 years they had together. And then he was like, well, maybe not. And Jennair even, sent him this folder filled with these pictures of her crying. First, she sends him a folder of pictures of her naked. Then she sends him a folder of pictures of her crying. And Mark thinks it was to crush him.
Mm-hmm.
That's just crushing him.
Right.
What? Yeah. I think he does feel bad for what he's doing, but he wants to keep doing it anyway. He gives her these little slivers of hope over and over, and yet she's hearing everything he's saying to Meredith. I think Mark wants Jennair to leave him so he can be the victim.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Mark said in his book, quote, "I'm the cause of this unbelievable pain, and I feel awful about it," end quote.
Didn't feel bad enough about it.
Yeah, dude, you are. She's trying to save the marriage, and he is working on something else.
Yeah.
He's confused. He's indecisive. And that is going to be the undoing of her in this relationship, because he won't just say what he wants to do.
Right.
He apparently did try to break things off with Meredith for 90 days, and he was going to try to make it work with Jennair if she got a job and they went to counseling. And he writes Meredith a letter about this, and he's afraid that their love is fleeting, but he never sends the email. Which reminds me, he left Jennair when they were younger and dated this other girl who then broke his heart and then left him, and he went crawling back to Jennair. So Meredith is 17 years younger than him. I don't think he's convinced that she's going to stick around long term with him. And Jennair knows all of his flaws and his shortcomings.
Right.
So I think he feels like he's taken a big leap here. He could leave Jennair and then just step into something that's going to be temporary.
Right.
He tells Jennair that he told Meredith it was over, but he said Meredith doubled down and wanted to fight for him. And Jennair was like, "What do you think I have been doing?" And he tells Meredith they wouldn't see each other for 90 days. And he didn't send the email, but he said it to her. And that lasted how long, you think?
90 seconds.
One day.
Yeah.
Jennair records herself talking to herself all about everything that's happening. She's crying. It's really heartbreaking. If you've ever been in a relationship where there's infidelity, it's hard. You feel worthless. And that's how she comes across, that she's not worth being faithful to.
Right.
And Mark leaves on a work trip, and she thinks that he's actually with Meredith. So she texts him, and he says that he isn't with Meredith. This is before she leaves and goes to Villanova.
Okay.
But Jennair doesn't believe him. And even though Luke Chapman has told Jennair not to contact him anymore, she does anyway. She calls him and says, you need to get in touch with Meredith and my husband. And the fallout between Meredith and Luke is pretty bad. He doesn't want any part of the Meredith Mark Jennair show. Remember, he's a politician.
Sure.
So he doesn't want any part of this.
Right.
So after Meredith's husband has asked for a divorce and her boyfriend has asked for a 90-day break, right?
Yeah.
Even though it only lasts for a day, it feels like it's all starting to go to hell in a handbasket. And Luke is going to make her divorce with him brutal. And now it's even a little contentious between Meredith and Mark.
Oh.
Now, one night, Jennair is home alone while Mark was going to Starbucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Jennair follows him to Starbucks because she can see there's a wine bar next door. And when she gets to the parking lot, she sees Meredith's car. And Jennair's going to confront her in person. She's never confronted her before.
Wow. Okay.
And she approaches the table. She leans in and whispers something in Meredith's ear and then says, "Come home now," to Mark.
Jeez.
Like really loud and commanding.
Man.
And he said, quote, "I'll come home when I'm done," end quote. And Jennair looks at Meredith and says, quote, "There's a special place in hell for women like you," end quote.
Wow.
Yeah. So Mark leaves, Meredith stays, and the bartender tells Meredith, "You need to get a restraining order on that unhinged woman." And Mark tells Jennair to leave Meredith alone and asks Meredith not to get the restraining order. And she doesn't. Jennair starts researching divorce attorneys. It's April 1st, and she sees a divorce attorney. She's concerned about what would happen to her. She didn't want to lose Mark's health insurance, and she makes all these doctor's appointments. And then she stops recording, and she starts writing a 15-page letter or manifesto, depending on how you look at it.
Okay.
She adds to this letter every few days. She emails it to her family in the end, saying, quote, "I don't have a chance in hell," end quote. "There's no great love that comes afterwards. I have no kids. I'm so ugly and an old, wrinkly lady. I can't stand looking at myself in the mirror. I see the future and it's bleak. I'm broken and cannot be repaired. I wouldn't ask for your forgiveness, but just know that I'm sorry to make you sad and to have to go through what's next." End quote.
No.
Yeah.
See this coming.
This woman is crying for help, crying for help. It all comes to a head on Valentine's Day, 2018. Mark is meeting Jennair at their marriage counselor's office, and he's putting on his jacket, and he can feel something in the lining, and he thinks maybe it's an anti-theft device or something, and he cuts open the lining, and he finds a recorder, and he takes it into their therapy session, and Jennair says, "Okay, yeah, I did it." And he's like, "How many of these are there?" And she's like, "Well, maybe a dozen." And he's like, "What the heck and heck?"
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
But she says, "I won't do it anymore." But she's going to keep on doing it. And that's, of course, just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Later that night, Mark is so upset with her. He says things that he has said in his book that he regrets. I don't know what that was. I do know he flipped a table. I did read that he told Jennair that she was nothing to him. Nothing. She threatens to jump out the window, and he thinks that she's just looking for attention. She threatens, they live on the 7th floor, and he tells her to call her family, to call her parents, to call a shrink. And when Jennair says to him, "I know you're sleeping with her," he lies and says, "I'm not." After all of this, by their third marriage counseling session, Mark tells Jennair that he wants to end the marriage. It's going in the wrong direction. Yeah, dude, you're driving the dump truck.
Yeah.
He tells her that he's petitioning for divorce as soon as he meets the residency requirement in May of 2018. And now he's told Jennair, officially, he wants out. Luke and Meredith are divorced. She buys a little house in the mainline area around Philly. She's taking her new job as the assistant vice president at Villanova. Mark, who now knows Jennair is cloning his texts, starts using Snapchat with Meredith, telling her how he dreamed about their, quote, great sex. But Jennair knows about these messages as well because she's getting into Mark's phone while he sleeps and is taking screenshots of the Snapchats before they go away in 24 hours.
Wow.
And Jennair still has her moments where she loses it and tells him things like, quote, "I can't watch that happen. I can't watch you have a happy life," end quote. And when he asks, what does that mean? She tells him, quote, "We can't be friends. We cannot talk. I can't. It's too painful for me to see you living your life happy. She's living my life," end quote.
Wow.
And it's interesting because Jennair is a person who has always hated guns and hunting. She's not pro-gun in any way, but she goes to a gun store on March 20th, 2018 and buys a .357 Taurus.
Oh.
And she starts taking lessons at the shooting range and going to target practice.
Wow.
Quote, "My life is such a waste. I don't deserve it anymore," end quote. The gun store she buys it from is directly across the street from the coffee shop where Mark and Meredith would always meet, something that Mark's later going to discover. She tells no one about this gun, and she doesn't even talk about it in her videos or in her journal. Now, meanwhile, Meredith's divorce is final. She no longer had to worry about being fired because she's got her new job. She's dreaming of the day when she and Mark can go out like a real couple. Meredith drops her married name. She takes off her wedding ring, and she tells Mark that she would like a promise ring from him. He can put something on that finger. And Jennair hears all of this because she's still recording him.
Sure.
Meredith's telling Mark that she dreamed of him as a little girl and that their paths were destined to cross and they were just supposed to be together. And while she's waiting for May to come around and the divorce to happen, Jennair is stalking Meredith, who is totally unaware. She's going to Meredith's new house. She takes binoculars and sits in a car that she rents and watches. And by now she has over 400 private conversations downloaded between Mark and Meredith.
Wow.
And for the past few months, while she's followed them and listened in on their conversations, she's been writing this manifesto, and she's really been documenting her mental health struggles when she does these like video diary things.
Mm-hmm.
Mark finally makes an appointment with a divorce attorney for April 7th. He's still not sure if he wants a divorce, according to him.
Wow.
He tells the attorney about the listening devices, how she's stalked him and Meredith and called Luke Chapman. And according to him, his attorney tells him, "You need to get out of this. It's not safe. You can't put this back together again. Look at all the things she's done. The trust is gone." I don't know if an attorney would say those things or not, but I'm just kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think an attorney is going to say, "You can't trust her. It's not safe. You can't put this back together again." I think he's going to be like, "Here's my retainer.
Right.
Tell me what you'd like
Right.
to happen, and then we'll go from there."
Right.
You know, honestly, seriously.
Yeah, I don't know why an attorney would want to take that responsibility if something happened. I mean,
Exactly.
that could stand in a court of law.
Exactly.
Wow.
After Mark leaves this divorce attorney, he calls Meredith. And he tells her that he's getting a divorce as soon as he meets his 6-month residency in the state of Delaware. Then he called Mike, his best friend, who's elated. He's really happy for him.
Mm-hmm.
Then he went to a jewelry store and picked out and ordered a promise ring for Meredith, a band with diamonds. And his plan is to give it to her when it would be ready in mid-May. Now, something that I thought was funny, she knows that this has happened, that he has picked out this promise ring for her.
Mm-hmm.
And she documents in one of her video diaries that he sucks at picking out jewelry. And she's not going to like it no matter what it is because he's terrible at picking out jewelry.
Right.
So after he visits the divorce attorney, he tells Jennair, "I'm filing for divorce." She's upset at first, but then she takes it really well. And after Mark tells her that he's petitioning, Jennair becomes eerily cooperative. She pulls herself together. She says she'll give him the divorce he wants, but she has a list of requirements. They have to live together until May. They have to spend as much time together as possible. Walks, dinners. She set up a calendar, and he had to put it on the calendar when he was going to be with Meredith. He says he just wanted it to be amicable until their lease was up and their divorce was done. He doesn't think her demands are out of the ordinary. Well, she wants him to put it up on this calendar because she's going to cross-reference it with what she really knows.
Yeah.
He thinks he's no longer being recorded, but he is. She can hear all the planning Meredith and he are doing, how excited they were to make love and sleep together, and how he'd never had anyone to be as supportive as she was.
Okay, whatever.
Then she decides she wants justice. She gets really calm. She wants justice. Quote, I want control over this shithole he's making. I need to take matters into my own hands, end quote.
That's not good.
Jennair is obsessing about her future. She wants to split everything 50-50. He wants 60-40. Alimony becomes a fight. She thinks he's going to leave her high and dry, and she's going to be a bag lady. She says it a lot. I'm going to be a bag lady. Mm-hmm. She thinks that he and Meredith will get married and have babies and live happily ever after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She thinks Mark will think that she's a freeloader because she's had trouble finding a job in the past. Remember? She's going to be a bag lady.
Yeah.
She's in pain, and the wine and medication isn't helping. She's on edge a lot. She's having kind of a break from reality. She can't see the future without Mark. She can't see that it's going to get better. She wasn't really looking for a job because she's spending her nights listening and piecing together what Mark and Meredith's life is.
Right.
She says that she can't live without Mark and that he is her soulmate. Quote, he took the best years of my life. Their actions have consequences, end quote.
Man.
So after she gets, sort of calm and stuff, they're still fighting about alimony. She even asks him if he will help her with her resume. And she tells Mark, I got to get out of Delaware. I'm going to go back to Indiana or somewhere else. Then on April 23rd, 2018, Mark goes to work, leaving Jennair at home with the dog and their cat, Gypsy. She loves these pets, by the way.
Right.
She has surgery scheduled for the next day. Remember, she's still on his medical plan.
Right.
And she has these fibroids in her uterus that need surgery. And she wants to take care of it before Mark kicks her off his insurance plan.
Right.
So as if it's not bad enough, the woman 15 years younger than you is sleeping with your husband. The man you've forgiven before for infidelity, the man you thought was going to stick by you for better or worse in sickness and health. I mean, your body is failing you while her young body is changing his life.
Yeah.
Quote, I need to make my own justice. It's the only way to set me free of this pain. It really is. He did this to me. He cannot get away with this unspeakable treatment. He is so inhumane that he deserves to be hurt in return. He cannot have a beautiful, exciting future and life with her at my expense. She does not get to replace me. She does not get to have all the things in common and all the connected experiences that are exactly like the ones Mark and I had. She does not get his undying love and attention and smiles and listening and encouragement, support and protection when he should have given that to me. He does not get to be loved and sexually fulfilled by her when he should and could have been doing this for me. Mark needs to stew in his shit he created and suffer as equally as I have had to suffer. He's not allowed to be happy after hurting me and treating me the way he did. Unconditional love is a gift. He's shit all over that, which I gave to him. But he can't have Meredith, his true magical love meant to be. He made promises to me at our wedding, after boot camp, and throughout our marriage, and he broke them all and in fact ruined my life. He is not allowed to get away with that and be happy, end quote.
Good grief. Wow.
And it's at this point Jennair is truly having a psychotic break.
Yeah.
And remember, Mark says Jennair doesn't lose a fight. She wants justice. She wants justice.
Yeah.
Quote, she's speaking about Meredith. She's a parasite, a blood-sucking, life-sucking parasite, and she needs to be destroyed. It's all I can think about. I just want to blow her face off and destroy her. I want Mark to have the lasting memories of the visuals of us both like that. It's all I dream about, end quote.
Man.
Yeah.
That's scary.
And this is where it does get scary. So I'm just going to tell you now, if you want to yeet out now, if you want to get out now, now's the time.
Fair warning.
So Mark is trying to help Meredith move into her new home, but it's hard because he's not allowed to be at the old home where Luke Chapman lives because Luke doesn't want him there.
Right.
Jennair tells Mark he can't go anywhere locally with Meredith because she doesn't want to see them together. And Meredith is falling apart because she can't see Mark. And they think they're just biding their time until the divorce happens, right?
Right.
There's 1 week left before Mark's 6th-month residency gives him the ability to file for divorce. And Jennair and Mark are talking, and he confesses that he's actually insecure about his relationship with Meredith. Why would he do this to her? He thinks she will break up with him in a year because she'll realize what she got with him. So, yeah, he knows that Jennair won't be there to catch him when he falls this time.
Right.
And not only that, how insensitive to say this to your soon-to-be ex-wife.
Well, you're talking about somebody who's inherently selfish to begin with.
They're all selfish.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yep.
Jennair can't get past her own pain, and Mark's been gaslighting her for 6 months, and now she feels like she has no choice. The wheels are put into motion. She writes in her journal that she's done with this life. She goes to Kohl's to buy black sweatpants and a hoodie, and then to a beauty supply store to buy a wig. She rents a Cadillac sedan, and then she goes to the shooting range with her new gun. She's going to end Meredith Chapman's life. A day later, on April 15th, she stakes out Meredith's house. She doesn't know how to do what she needs to do. And as she's recording these videos, she's talking about her plan that if Mark shows up while she's trying to end Meredith, that she might have to pull a Phil Hartman and kill him too. But she thinks that's the easy way out for Mark. And if you don't remember this, Phil Hartman's wife shot him and then herself.
Right.
When Mark is going out with Meredith, he parks his car really far away from where he's going, so she can't follow him. And as he's leaving, Jennair tells him this one last time to wear a condom. And he tells her, quote, "That's not happening. We're not sexually active," end quote. Lies.
This guy.
Lies.
Gee whiz.
Lies. On April 21st, 2018, Jennair follows Mark, who's helping Meredith unpack at her new house. A neighbor sees her, but thinks that Jennair is a bird watcher. Then Jennair goes directly to the shooting range, and after she does this, she texts Mark about what kind of pizza he should bring home for dinner. But underneath it all, she's planning. April 22nd, Jennair buys groceries, and they take Huck for a hike, their golden retriever.
Right.
And Mark and Jennair have a pleasant conversation. Then April 23rd arrives. At 5 a.m., Jennair emails her divorce coach. She has an appointment with her that afternoon. She tells the coach that she's signed a $1,000 retainer agreement with her divorce attorney. At 7:30 a.m., Mark leaves for work. They make plans to meet for dinner that night. According to him, he said, quote, "Goodbye, I love you," end quote. He's telling her he loves her on the way out of the door.
Yeah.
On his way to work, he stops at Starbucks to get Meredith her favorite coffee order, and he texts her. And Jennair sees that Mark is at Meredith's house on her GPS app and takes a screenshot and titles it, quote, "Look who's going to Meredith's house today, 8 a.m. He and Jennair text that day about the dog and about other things, and Jennair gives no indication that she's upset. She spends the morning searching for prescription cat food for Gypsy, her cat. Then she emails her divorce coach to cancel her 2:30 appointment, saying that there's not much left to talk about. She has this fibroid surgery the next day, scheduled for the next day, so she tells her about that. Then Jennair does laundry. She cleans the apartment. She lays out all the bank information with accounts and passwords, even the ones that he doesn't know about. She writes the final part of her letter or her manifesto, where she wants Meredith to suffer and that it's all over. But she also makes a request. She wants Mark to put her healthy cat down because she doesn't think Gypsy can survive without her, and she doesn't want anyone else to have her or for the cat to be lost.
Wow.
At noon that day, she drives this rented Cadillac to a gourmet food mart. She has some lunch, and when she's finished, she goes back to the gun range one more time. At 3 p.m., she stops at a gas station, then drives to Meredith's house. Nobody sees her. The lock is broken on the screen door at Meredith's home, and Jennair easily makes it inside the covered porch. So she makes it from the outside, inside this covered porch.
Right.
Then she breaks a pane of glass on the door and reaches in and unlocks the door. Remember, she stalked and reconned Meredith's house, so she knows this is what she can do.
Sure.
Then she cleans up the broken glass. Jennair takes out her phone and she takes some photographs. She knows Meredith will be home at 6 p.m. At 5:42, Meredith posts on Instagram while standing on the Villanova campus, quote, "Couldn't be more excited to be the new assistant VP in creative services. Just a week on the job, and I'm already feeling the love from Nova Nation," end quote.
Wow.
Also at 5:45, Mark is sitting at a restaurant waiting for Jennair. They were supposed to have dinner after Jennair's meeting with her divorce coach, and Jennair sends a text to him that she's running late. She took a wrong turn. At 6 p.m., Meredith arrives home and walks in. Jennair, who is hiding right inside the door, immediately shoots Meredith in the face, just like she wanted to. Meredith falls face down to the ground. Her car keys are still in her grip. Then Jennair called a woman that she had just recently met at the apartment complex where they lived, saying, quote, "I've done a bad thing," end quote. That's the message she leaves for this woman that she really barely knows.
Wow. How would you like to get that message?
I know.
Gee whiz.
Mark is still waiting at the restaurant, and this is when Jennair sends him a photo of an opened bag of trash on a sidewalk, and in the middle of the trash is a used condom. And along with the photo, Jennair says, quote, "I knew you f***ed her," end quote. And Mark thinks that Jennair is outside Meredith's house rifling through the trash. And he texts back, quote, "This photo is disturbing in so many ways," end quote. Mark then puts it together. He realizes that Jennair is at Meredith's house, and he starts calling Meredith, but she's not picking up.
Right.
Then Jennair sends Mark another text, quote, "You ruined my life." Then she sends him another one. "I hope you never find happiness." And then her final text, third and final text, "Bye, Mark."
Wow.
Jennair points the gun at herself and pulls the trigger. At 6:30 p.m., Mark is calling both Jennair and Meredith. Everything's going to voicemail. He knocks on the door, no reply. He goes around to the back to knock, and when he steps up to the porch and he looks through the window, he can see Meredith lying face down. He pushes inside the house, and he says that his mind wasn't working, that he wasn't putting it together, that what he was seeing.
Right.
He didn't think Meredith was dead. He thinks she's passed out. And he shouts to the neighbor to call 911, and the neighbor calls 911 and then takes his cell phone in his hand and comes inside the house with Mark. And while he's talking to 911, this is the neighbor, the operator tells him to check for a pulse. And the neighbor says, "No pulse." And Mark is like, "What do you mean, no pulse?" This is when he realizes she's dead, according to him.
Right.
Mark stands up and then sees another body dressed in black, and then he realizes it's Jennair. He yells out to the neighbors, "My wife is in here too," end quote. The police and EMS show up, and Mark is taken into custody. Of course he is. His wife and lover are both dead.
Sure.
But as police cleared the crime scene, they find the gun under Jennair's body. At 2 a.m., he's home. Huck, the dog, and Gypsy, the cat, are asleep. The police had been to their apartment and taken her phone and her laptop. He sees that she's left all of this bank information and passwords. She had made homemade dog food for Huck, and she cleaned the house. It was spotless.
Wow.
It is an absolute media storm because think about it. Meredith is well known and well loved. It's a love triangle. It's a crime of passion.
Yep.
And Mark is now worried. He's taking back Jennair's leased car. He's worried. He's afraid to start it because he thinks that maybe she might have rigged it for a bomb to kill him too.
Right.
But she wanted to keep him alive. She wanted him to suffer. Meredith's ex-husband, her family and friends have never given interviews about her murder. They are, of course, devastated. Mark was not invited to Meredith's memorial, and he wasn't welcome at Jennair's funeral either. A whole year goes by, and after this, Mark writes a book, Irreparable, and it's released to a lot of mixed reviews because in the book, he basically writes that Jennair is kind of this loud, horrible person who always had him under her thumb,
right.
And that Meredith, his beloved M, was perfect. After the book comes out, he goes on Dr. Oz, and then there's a 2020 episode, all coinciding with the release of his book. Of course, now it's been 7 years since the murder-suicide. And if Jennair wanted Mark to suffer, Well, I don't know about that. He's remarried, and his private social media accounts all show a very happy man.
Wow.
But Jennair left these words behind for him. Quote, I hope this haunts him forever. Hell, I'll still haunt him from beyond just because he deserves it. I will stand over him while he sleeps all night, glaring and breathing my cold, ripe breath in his face. End quote.
Wow.
I know, right? It's a lot.
Man.
Again, I just want to say, if you or somebody you love is struggling with their mental health, even if they're not in the middle of a messy divorce or infidelity, but they're feeling helpless and hopeless, all you have to do is pick up the phone and dial 988 for the Suicide Crisis Hotline. And you can text it too. And you can also visit their website, 988lifeline.org. And on this website, they even have pre-written messages you can send to someone you trust if you don't know how to express what you're feeling or that you're in crisis. And again, the Lifeline is available 24/7, 365, and all conversations are free and confidential. But that is the story of Jennair Gerardot and her love triangle between her husband and his lover. And that's all I have to say about that. For nearly 7 years, Jane Doe has lived in the shadows, her past buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and silence. After completing more than was asked of her in her last assignment for the enigmatic Kaiwolf project, Jane Doe vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of dead bodies and unanswered questions. But now, as the specter of her past returns with a vengeance, Jane finds herself thrust back into a world she thought she'd left behind forever. When her former sins come knocking on her door, Jane is faced with an impossible choice: continue to hide in the shadows, or once again take up arms against the forces that threaten to tear apart the fabric of society. With enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Jane must rely on her wits, training, and her unyielding determination to survive. And while trust is a luxury she cannot afford, Jane must confront the truth about herself and her past. As the clock ticks, she realizes that the line between family, friend, and foe are razor thin, and in the end, the only person she can rely on is herself. Jane Doe 4 Charlotte is available September 24th, 2024. No name, no regrets, no mercy.
You know, I always wonder, when people have affairs and things like that, they always think they're not going to get caught.
Yeah.
Or that they're going to get out of this. It's going to be smooth.
Yeah.
It just makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. Listen, if your partner or your spouse has an affair, it's going to suck for a while. If you try to stay together, it's going to suck for a while. Yeah. If you decide to be apart and get divorced, it's going to suck for a while. It's just going to suck for a while.
Yep. Yep.
It just really is. But don't take matters into your own hands like Jennair did, because she was really hell-bent on making him pay. And in the end, did she really make him pay? No.
I mean, what's that saying, that a permanent solution to a temporary problem?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's lighten it up. What do you think?
Please, let's lighten it up.
With a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right. Number one, I'm calling, well, at least he made his court date.
Okay.
This one's a little long, but it's worth it.
Okay.
Okay. Prosecutors say that Timothy Frederick Knight, a 53-year-old San Francisco man already charged with auto theft, stole another car to make his preliminary hearing in an earlier case.
What?
Knight is now facing potential second strike if convicted. Knight, who has 7 prior convictions, was arrested February 15th in Daly City on suspicion of possessing a stolen car. He was given an April 3rd preliminary hearing date at the South San Francisco courthouse and released on $50,000 bail.
Okay.
The day before the hearing, Knight reportedly stole a Honda Accord in Daly City, which police found parked on the street. The vehicle theft task force later secretly placed a tracker on the car, which Knight drove April 3rd to the courthouse. He obviously wanted to make sure he didn't fail to appear, District Attorney Steve Wagstaff said. At his hearing, Knight's case was continued, so he left. Task force agents arrested him after he got in the car to drive away. The car ignition had been punched out with a screwdriver, which police reported finding on the floorboard. Yeah, it's not a good idea to punch out the starter if you're, Knight was pleaded not guilty in the new case, but was held to answer on all charges after an April 15th preliminary hearing. He appeared in court Wednesday to set a June 16th jury trial and is also due back May 2nd for a preliminary hearing in the older case. I mean, can you keep all this straight?
Yeah.
Okay. Wagstaff expects the two to be scheduled together in the future. Knight remains in custody on a $100,000 bail.
Yeah. So he stole a car, gets out, steals another car to come in for that hearing. And they see that, so they get him for that too. But the good news is they're combining everything. Yeah. And he doesn't have a bunch of court dates. He's got one court date.
He can get to jail sooner.
There you go.
There you go. All right, number 2. You found it where?
Oh, no. I don't know if I want to hear this one or not.
A police report says a search at a Tennessee jail turned up a loaded North American Arms .22 caliber mini revolver inside a woman.
I was going to say I already know that. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Archer was searched by 2 female officers in a bathroom when they found the 4-inch weapon hidden inside of her. A computer check later revealed that the weapon had been stolen, and its 70-year-old owner, John Souther, told the Smoking Gun website he would like the little fellow returned, but added the weapon would require a bath and bleach.
Oh, my gosh.
Arthur is charged with possession of a stolen property, illegal possession of a firearm, and introducing contraband into the jail.
So, quick story. I actually... part of Writers Police Academy. I've toured a bunch of jails, but the first one we went in, I'd never been in one before. Mm-hmm. And the first one we went in, they took us in this little room. There were maybe 10 of us. And they have all this stuff out on this one table. Right. And I'm like, what is all of this? And they're like, oh, these are things that we've taken out of body cavities. And I'm like, what?
Oh, Lord have mercy.
What?
It's bad enough that you got caught doing a crime, but okay, whatever. Okay, number 3, and finally. Oops,
I did it again.
Mm-hmm. A robber was in the process of robbing a hot dog stand in the far south side of Chicago when he discharged his weapon on himself, the Chicago Tribune reports. The infamous incident was reported in November of 2017. To add a flair of poetic justice to the yarn, the hot dog stand robber shot himself in the penis, citing the Sacramento Bee. He thought he was going in for some quick cash. The suspect... Hey, I know, I can't get through it either. I've got my legs crossed. The suspect entered a restaurant with a loaded firearm looking to score easy money and maybe some free food. This took place at the hot dog stand on the restaurant area, Maxwell Street Express. The Chicago Sun-Times identified the culprit as Terrian Pouncey, aged then 19 years old. The teen approached the hot dog stand and demanded cash. When he went to adjust the .38 pistol he had brought along, he shot himself twice. Once to his...
not twice to the penis, right?
Once to his penis and once to his leg. This took... I can't even get through it. This took place Tuesday morning, the week of November 3rd, which would have made the actual day of the crime Halloween 2017, citing the Sacramento Bee. Pouncey remained hospitalized. See, I can't even talk.
It was all tricks, no treats.
Yeah, exactly. Pouncey remains hospitalized on All Saints Day, November 2nd, 2017. He therefore missed his first court appearance for good measure.
Do you think they tried to stop the bleeding with the bun?
Oh. Would you like some mustard on that?
I'm horrible. I'm sorry. That's where my head went. I'm sorry.
Man.
I'm sorry.
That was good.
No tourniquet. We don't have anything to like stop the bleeding. Here's a bun.
Yeah, here's a bun.
It should fit perfectly.
Oh, Lord.
I'm bad. I'm sorry. I'm bad. I'm so bad. It's because I haven't had any sleep.
Well, that's
what it is. Well, if you have a bless your heart, or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, or somebody who needs a bun to stop the bleeding, all you have to do is go to hitchtahomicide.com. And when you get there, there's a pull-down menu. And while you're there, you can also suggest a case or tell us about your brush with true crime. Hopefully it's
with good crime.
Your bun with true. Hopefully it is not at a hot dog stand.
Yeah, exactly.
That is my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.